video I forgot to mention, that was also the year I preached my first sermon as a part of the ministry training school. We were each asked, so 55 students, we were given a whole week where everybody took turns to complete the assignment, but a 15-minute one-point sermon. So I preached my first sermon ever in Cantonese, not English, and I was terrified. And I got a pass, which is what I got for everything. But I have to admit, I was slightly rebellious on that one, because I actually knew the format that we had been taught and told to do, and I wanted to stand out. And I also was thinking about my classmates potentially being somewhat bored, and so I got creative with my first sermon and presented a different format, which was a comment that class's teacher did put on my paper, was this was not the format that was taught. And for me, I was like, I already know that format. I've been listening to sermons since I was a baby. But anyhow, it was good. It was good. And I came out with full fluency. Once I graduated, I went back to correspondence school, finished my coursework, and prepped and took the SATs just in case I ever went to college, like other than, did some stuff like that. And then as soon as I was done with high school, I went full on at a screaming pace of ministry that probably was as intense, almost as intense as the Bible school that I had been in. Also worthy of note, I went on my second mission trip in Asia. Now, 2 videos ago, I said that Macau was my first missions trip, and I meant my first missions trip in Asia, because I had done a missions trip when I was 14, and still living stateside. Anyhow, so went to Taiwan. Once again, I couldn't speak the language, and it was somewhat of a challenge, but I think that I was kinder to myself, because I didn't expect that I would be able to speak Mandarin Chinese when what I knew was Cantonese. Chinese, they're called dialects. That classification is political, not linguistic. Linguistically, the differences between Cantonese and Mandarin would be like English to Spanish, except for that they share the same written language, but it would be pronounced differently depending on which dialect you speak. Just to give you kind of a frame of reference, like I've been fluent in Cantonese since that year, since I was 18, and I'm learning Mandarin right now on Duolingo, and I'm not confident to speak it. There is a sushi restaurant here in Topeka where I am, where the waitress is Mandarin speaking, and I feel rather shy to even attempt any with her. So yeah, very different languages. Now, most of the Mandarin I do know at this point, I learned during the 2 weeks in Taiwan. By that point, I had friends who could help me translate from Cantonese to Mandarin. I memorized my testimony, my salvation story, if you will, in Mandarin. Actually had an assigned translator following me around, who became a friend and a pen pal for a while. I remember it being much easier than Macau. I think everybody on the team, I knew more people on the team. I could communicate with them, and I'd gone easier on myself. So I do remember that, receiving Holy Spirit's help in terms of language. The very last day we were asked to pray over people in the local church that had been hosting us, and I had a very simple word for somebody, but I wasn't super confident that I didn't even know if I had heard someone say it in Mandarin or not. But I felt like Holy Spirit taught me how to say what I needed to say. So that was pretty great. But okay, so back to present. We've sped up. We've gone through 97 to 98. 99 was me and my younger sister finished high school together because she didn't take the 1 year break. And then screaming pace into, by this point, I was going into school still. I was helping to lead small groups. I was leading worship. I had people that I was mentoring, that I was assigned to disciple, a full-on pace into ministry. And I joined a deliverance team. That's right, 2000. I joined a deliverance team where I got like next level because my pastor at the time, Anzo Wu, and probably one of the best pastors I've ever had, formed this team, and he was receiving training with a place in Hong Kong, a very local ministry called Elijah Mission. And he passed on his training to us, as well as another pastor, the pastor of the Indonesian congregation, a lady named Wing Zan. That woman was hardcore, old school deliverance minister. She'd show up and she'd be like, I spent last night praying in tongues over the phone with an Indonesian witch who had called me up to curse me. She was hardcore. So these were my early times of equipping. It was a time that I discovered that just because my parents had received inner healing and deliverance from their histories, their family and personal histories, didn't mean that I got off scot-free. So I had a rather intensive experience of being prayed for freedom myself, where I reacted more intensely than I expected, and was a little embarrassed because, like, wow, the missionary kid needs this too. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people, even people on that team, who believed that since my parents were missionaries and believed in Jesus, that I should be immune to most of the problems that people face and struggles in the world, which is not the case. That was a season where I started discovering that those attitudes were a thing. I developed a little bit of an attitude back, like, I wasn't like bad on purpose or anything, but it was a thing for me to overshare sometimes, with the hopes to try to prove to people that I'm allowed to have problems too, and that I'm not immune from the fallen world. And I think it was a season where I have a very strong value to this day for authenticity, and quite an allergy to anything that to me smells of, judgment or religious performance, or, just anything that involves not being open and curious and accepting of other people. So yeah, there was a lot going on during that season. And looking back, it was tough. It was very tough. And, eventually came to a point where the first small group that I had been leading imploded before it started. And then the second one came to a situation where we disbanded it because it was not working out. And I'd gone through one kind of small round of burnout with the first group imploding. I went through a much bigger round of just second guessing myself, wondering if I'm cut out for ministry, thinking that maybe things I touch fall apart. There were a lot of there was a lot of things I had to work through, and part of it was that this church very much emphasized like what they viewed as bearing fruit in ministry was being able to bring enough people into the church to go from your standard size small group starts out about 5 people to grow it to 15 people and multiply. And if you've never multiplied a small group, you're not qualified to be on staff. You know, maybe you don't know what you're doing. Maybe your ministry isn't good enough. There were some messages there that it took me quite a while to unwork after I left that church. But I'm getting ahead of myself and this video is becoming long.